They are icons of comedy and an American institution. 3 characters that are part of the very fabric of popular culture.
I ought to know. One of them was my father.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Just how do you grapple with the fact that the apple never falls far from the tree? Well, it landed with a clunk, slap, plop, when it came to me. My source of frustration was my dad's occupation. He's a stooge. Oh no, egad! Hey Mo! Hey Mo! Hey Mo! Hey Mo! Hey Dad! I always hope to be an ordinary Joe, a face in the crowd, John Doe. But just my luck, I'm born son of Mo. I never yucked for my father, and it wouldn't be Mo if I had my brothers. And oh, by the way, take a look at his brothers. Hey Mo, hey Mo, hey Mo, hey Mo, hey Dad. But while I was blinking, something got me to thinking how my dad was always for real. It hit me with a bonk, boom, crash, is what it took to get me to feel. Well, now I ain't hiding and I'm swelling with pride, along for the ride and glad. So here's the Three Stooges story in all his knucklehead glory. It ain't just a passing fad. Hey Mo, hey Larry, hey Uncle Curly, Uncle Shep, hey Joe and Curly Joe. Hey Mo, hey Mo, hey Dad, Kerplop.
By the mid-1930s, in towns big and small, the Great Depression had America by the throat. If there was an antidote for all this misery,
Hey, Larry.
maybe it came not from a good cry, but from a good laugh. And if that's the case, then it was just the kind of medicine being dispensed by the Three Stooges.
Spread out. I'll take 'em. Hey, got a dime for a sandwich, buddy?
What do you mean a dime? You just asked me for a dime down the street there.
Check 'em, boys.
Well, I think the zeitgeist of the Stooges in their time was a dog-eat-dog, Darwinian atmosphere. And I think people related. I mean, would kill over a scrap of food.
What's that?
Fill your soul and heal.
In a lot of their shorts, that's their characters.
The guys were always looking for work, looking for a buck, trying to find a place to sleep, trying to find a gal, trying to get by in tough times. And that was something that everybody in the 1930s could really relate to.
My good man, how long have you been starving?
Mister, I haven't tasted food for 3 days.
You haven't?
No.
Well, I wouldn't worry about it. It still tastes the same.
There's a chasm that is so wide in this country, and in the Depression I can see it then because the Stooges always pointed up that difference, that chasm when they'd have some rich fat guy, eating turkey legs and pieces of steak and washing it down with a double scotch and everything, and they'd be in the window like, ugh. They'd always have to make a plan, and it'd involve a dog or another person or whatever, just to get a taste of that food.
Oh, listen, mister, we don't mean any harm. We're hungry. Do you know where we can get a job?
Why, you've got your...
The comedy inspired by all this despair struck a chord deep in the collective consciousness. Everybody was out of work, everybody was out of luck, and everybody was suffering.
I think people at the time, guys at the time especially, who were going out, like, you know, the famous thing where they would go to the movies instead, they would pretend they were looking for work, and they would see the Stooges doing almost the same thing on screen.
They weren't trying to be something they weren't. They were three guys trying to get stuff done, whether it was painting or trying to babysit something. You know, they were always trying to get to the goal. You know, there was always the goal. And it wasn't done in giant movie form, which Abbott and Costello were. It was more intimate. The comedy was more intimate. I could sit, I could watch, and I could see what they were doing.
And these three hopeless, hapless, and yet eternally optimistic everymen became the surrogates of all those downtrodden people. They kept their heads up as they lowered the boom on the pompous and the powerful, the very culprits who had been the cause of the Depression. It must have felt like a much-needed boost for the little guys.
There's a certain formula we work on which is very acceptable both to young and old, and that is the upsetting of dignity. That's the basis we work on. In other words, see a man with a high hat, with a monocle, spats, evening clothes, and you smack him in the face with a pie, they accept that beautifully. That's what they want to see. They want to see the high mucky muck be dragged down to somebody else's level.
They did clash with the upper class, I think to the great delight of the audience of the time. Probably the classic early case is Hoi Polloi, where they're actually brought into it in a remake of Pygmalion, where two professors bet each other. One says he can make gentlemen out of the Stooges, so you know where that's going.
I forget what happened. If you men will promise to do something for me. Okay, we'll do it. What is it? Permit me to transform you men into gentlemen. Oh, no. Police, help! Police! Hold on.
The twist at the end is that they become an in thing.
A backbiter, eh? See that? Hey, where's your dignity? Spread out.
The crowd loves their behavior, and these stuffed shirts get a chance to act like the Stooges, and it's hip.
Spread out.
The Stooges are actually appalled to see their behavior reflected. Well, of course, they don't think that's their behavior.
My dear fellows, this is our punishment for associating with the hoi polloi.
But there was another, more symbolic aspect to the Stooges' appeal. These three cantankerous knuckleheads, always slapping each other silly, also had a strange sense of family, of community. As dysfunctional as they might have seemed, they were a team, and they implicitly pointed out to audiences something that they subconsciously already knew. If cruel circumstances make you small and helpless, then the only way to survive is to stick together with your fellow victims.
What's the idea of moving into our apartment?
Come on, beat it.
I'm sorry, mister. Sis and I didn't know anyone lived here, so we just moved in. But we'll get out right away.
Hey, where's your father?
We ain't got no father. Just Sis and I.
Wait a minute, son. We made a mistake. This ain't our house. We didn't have any curtains. Go on, sit down and do your homework.
Oh, thank you.
Take it easy.
What they capture, I think, at any time about humanity is that they can't cooperate, but they can't separate.
Just a second. Let me have that wrench. Let me have it, you imbeciles.
They're trying to cooperate and usually making some simple problem worse. And then it deteriorates into war, you know, three-way war. And then, but they band, like a little nation, they band together when they're up against a common enemy, outside enemy. You don't really notice how short they are when they're together, because they're all the same size, right? But almost always when they're confronted by an outside enemy, they're really tiny guys, you know, compared to their adversaries, but they compensate with like unspeakable, abrupt and senseless violence. which they have on their side.
Oh, tough guy, huh?
Put all of these elements together, and you have three guys who were in the right place, Depression America, at the right, very bad time. And though the humor was topical and timely, there was something about it that speaks to people today, and any day.
As it turns out, those elements of comedy are timeless. And you don't have to be suffering yourself to empathize with a couple of guys, 3 guys actually, who are out of work.
You want to sign up?
Certainly, what do you think we're here for?
And will do anything
Sign right here.
to get a job.
It's a pleasure.
Oh, a job at last.
What are you going to do with all the money? Yes?
Yes?
Yes!
Yes?
Yes!
Yes?
Yes, yes!
Yes?
Yes!
Yes? What is it? What is it?
Yes!
Oh, yeah, yes! What? Yes, what?
A job! Well, you just hired yourself 3 good men. Yeah. Presto, changeo, domino. Oh, boy, we're going on a job.
What, already? We had a job 2 months ago. I got it! You mean we're going to be on the police force?
Oh, boy, 3 apples. Hey! Salesman, that's what I need. Salesman. Here we are, 3 of the best salesmen that ever sailed. Have you ever sold anything?
Have we ever sold anything?
Have we ever sold anything?
Have we? Oh! Hello.
Gentlemen, the studio is yours, and I shall do everything within my power to help you make better pictures.
What that needs is a mixture of Enar plus anacetyl scram. Happy birthday!
Happy birthday! Make a wish, dear, and blow out the candles.
Here they go.
You know, I think I was born to be rich.
Well, at this point, Moe, Larry, and Curly might not have been rich, but unlike most Americans, they had jobs, and pretty good jobs at that. The 3 were well on their way to achieving that most elusive of professional pursuits, becoming movie stars.
Do you see the same thing I do? The fat one. Fate must have sent him. He's the dead image of the missing link.
Oh, thank you.
Huh? I think you're right. And look at the other 2, Neanderthal men straight from the Stone Age. We've found our leading man. Now we can start our picture at once. You men are hired.
Fired and hired in 1 day. Thanks, B.O.
If it please the court, Your Honor, at this time I would like to introduce my 3 main witnesses, Howard, Fine, and Howard.
Every day, 3 men, Moe Howard, Larry Fine, and Curly Howard, went to work at Columbia Pictures. And when they stepped in front of the cameras, they left their real lives behind and became characters taking on the personas that today are as alive and as hilarious as they were then.
A bad beginning is a good ending. Certainly. If at first you don't succeed, keep on sucking till you do succeed.
Which brings us to a question. Just who are these guys who always seem to be doing these awful things to one another? Well, maybe it's time we investigate. So let's allow them to introduce themselves.
Hello.
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 And then figure out just what makes a stooge a stooge.
Eeny, meeny, miny, Moe. See, you can't go wrong with Moe. Thanks.
Moe represented pure aggression. I was thinking, why is he the boss? You know, he's not smarter, he's not more talented, he's not more creative, he's just meaner.
He always had an answer, or a sort of a suggestion of an answer to take care of a problem, and he'd get the other 2. Are you coming or not?
You stand guard while we fresh the joint. Me? You.
Me?
He does it because they let him do it.
I'll lead the way. Go ahead.
To millions of moviegoers sitting spellbound in the dark, he was Moe, the master of the Stooges and the meanest man to ever uncork a conch on the cranium.
See that?
Yeah. See that?
Don't you dare hit me in the head. You know I'm not normal.
Why?
See that? Oh. Why dare you do that again? That's not the same.
Even when I was a kid, I realized that there's one kid that gives the orders. You know, are we going swimming or are we going swimming? We're going swimming. You know, and we all get on the bus. And I saw that in Mo.
Mo was the stern guy trying to get them from where they were to where they were trying to get to, and dished out the punishment.
Mo is the boss, kind of the grouch. In some ways, the straight man, though he was also funny, but in some ways, he's the straight man because he's so often the butt of the jokes, but always the boss.
He was never trying to be funny. Never trying to be funny. Even when they did jokes that we got that were written down on paper, they never cracked up or laughed at it. It would just go by, you know, because an example of that would be like they were at this haunted house, you know, or something. They're at a door and Mo looks at Larry. They just happened, they were looking this way and then they both looked at each other at the same time. Mo went like that to him and he goes, "How much do you charge to haunt houses?" He goes, "How many rooms?" You know, but I would have died laughing if I were there.
More people, in my opinion, looked at Mo, not realizing that without the other two, Mo ain't no Mo. So it worked great, and when they saw it, I mean, they laughed. Just him going, I mean, you're dying. Today, they would lock you up. They would think there's something wrong with you. They had a rhythm, they had a purpose.
Get that weight. Hold that roll. Lift that barge. Tote that bale. Zoop. What am I doing?
I was a bully. I bullied them into thinking that I was smart. I was dumber than they were. You know, Curly was a big, heavy guy, you know, and the only extent of his retaliation, after they give him a bop on the head or something, he just goes, you know. Yeah, right. Although if he wanted to, he could have probably mashed me into the ground. Larry was a pest. He was always in the way. That was his character. Yeah. And Curly, he was just the fall guy for everything. He tried to do things. He'd try to call me by name and say there was something wrong in the room or something happening. I'd never pay attention to him. I ignored him completely. And then if they both bothered me, I'd give them that double slap right across the face. I never listened to him, you know.
What's that for?
We didn't do nothing.
That's in case you do and I'm not around.
People thought of them as idiots capering around, but behind what seemed to be simplicity, there was a lot of hard work and thought. Mo particularly was a very intelligent man. Well, he was the leader in every way. He was the boss in the shows, of course, but he was also the boss off stage, too. As such, when we had story conferences, he would take the lead and contribute the most.
I was doing radio in New York, and I ran into Emil Sitka. Just on the streets, he had a pair of Bermuda shorts on and, you know, some kind of baseball cap. And I stopped him and I just said hi, and I was asking him questions, and the subject of Mo came up. I mean, he loved him very much. He says, you know, Mo did not know how to relax. He was busy with a lot of things, but he didn't know how to relax.
I'll take it.
Yes, Mo was the boss.
Don't forget, this is my idea. I want to be captain.
And the bully, the guy with the short fuse and the long reach.
See that?
Please, don't do that, Mo.
Now, who's the captain?
No.
Who's the captain?
Aye, Captain.
All right.
Oh.
Aye, Captain. Follow me.
Oh.
It's not that he's mean. They're not paying attention. You know, it's like, you know how you pop a dog on the nose when you're trying to get the dog to come back and pay attention? He is constantly trying to get them to listen and focus and let's get this done. Now, as with most people who know as much as Mo knew, sometimes he's wrong, and he doesn't like being wrong, and sometimes that's why you get hit.
Time for lunch.
What is that?
Why, ignoramus, don't you know?
No.
Why, it looks like it.
Well, wise guys, what is it?
It's a spider.
Turtle.
Trying to kiss somebody, eh? I know it was a turtle all the time. Sit down.
And yet, in spite of his terrible temper, Mo was unexpectedly endearing. Perhaps it was because audiences sensed the insecurity beneath his scowl, the frustrations behind the face slaps, the desperation of a determined little guy grappling with a crazy world he couldn't control.
You must help me. You must.
Don't worry, madam. We'll get him out of jail if we have to go into jail to do it.
And so, Moe acted like the smartest guy in the room when he clearly wasn't.
Cut. You ain't shooting the picture right.
Why, what's the matter with it?
There's no action. It was no good from the first kiss.
And he acted like the toughest guy in the room when he clearly wasn't.
Now, no more of your screwy ideas. There's no dead woman in here.
See, I told you.
And he acted like the most put-upon guy in the room when he clearly wasn't.
Oh, pardon. Oh, oui. Oh!
Pardon, oui.
Fish ain't good enough for you, huh?
Hey, you 4.
5, 6, 7. Sold to the man with the spittoon haircut.
Oh, getting personal, eh?
And viewers understood all of it and loved him all the more for it. Just look at that face, locked in a perpetual parade of glares, growls, and grimaces. And look at that hair, recalling an overgrown Buster Brown hell-bent on wholesale destruction.
I went backstage outside the street. Moe came up. His face was like he had sunburn. And I said, "Hiya, Moe. Are you okay?" And then I realized those slaps and the punching and the kept saying. And then he says, "What are you doing up so late, kid?" And when I realized that now this man cared of a stranger, "What are you doing up so late?" He must have known I cut school. I was 14 years old. I said, "Well, I'm getting ready to go home and get a beating." He says, "You go home. You know, don't hang around like that." And something must have been on his mind because he walked. But I think you got to get tired from that 5, 6 shows a day, 7 days a week, you know. But they were special, and it must be difficult to be special like that. It must be difficult.
Moe had a journeyman mentality is what I get from everything. A journeyman who work was life, but not overlap, like bringing craziness home.
And there was Dad. He'd take 32 pages late at night, and they were memorized. He knew everybody's part, including his own. He'd wake up in the morning and not a thought to it.
I could see Moe wanting to work till the very last day, and he did.
The on-screen personality that Moe put together is a masterpiece of the comedian's art.
Oh, wait a minute, turnip head.
And, like a great architect, Moe constructed his creation upon a solid foundation. His timing was always perfect, whether it was with a word or a whack. And he had a genius for physical comedy that I think is still underappreciated.
The art of slapping someone, you know, that is an art form. When Moe slaps Curly or Larry, it is brilliant, you know, because it's like a ballet move. You know, it's all movement. And I assume, and I could be wrong, that the way that it's staged, the way that it's moved was to telegraph, here's it's coming now, be prepared. Here, bam.
This is perhaps best illustrated by his remarkable ability to accurately deliver a comic curveball. When he was a kid, Moe had quite a throwing arm, and that old baseball talent was always in evidence, whether he was launching a pie or a poke. It was said that the studio insisted that Moe always be one to fire the volleys of pastry that came from off camera. They knew that he could get it right the first time and every time.
Pardon me, madam.
Yes, that was Moe, irascible and radiantly funny. That was his character, majestically mean and relentlessly ridiculous. And that was the man I never actually met. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been calling that ornery stooge who pummeled his way through those Columbia shorts Moe rather than Dad, because that nasty guy was not my father. No, he was just a fantasy figure created by a film funny man, because when my dad was finished punching out his movie teammates, he was punching out a time clock and leaving his two-fisted tantrums at the studio gates. The man whom I called Dad was really somebody else, somebody you'll get to know a lot better as our story unfolds. For now, I can tell you that he was a devoted and yet undemonstrative father. He was expectedly fond of good friends and good times, and unexpectedly fond of gourmet cooking and classical guitar. And he was a man with both a healthy ego and a deeply seated streak of insecurity. One thing about Dad was always clear, however. He may have had trouble showing it, but there was no doubt that he cared enormously for his wife and child. And in 1935, as the Stooges were clowning their way into the affections of Americans, it was also the year that I went from being a gleam in my daddy's eye to being an official entry on the register of the diaper service. Yep, that was the year I was born. The year I joined the family. Of course, it was decidedly a show business family. And while I was a little young for my close-up, my sister Joni was not. And since my dad doted on his only daughter, it seemed only fitting that little Joni got her turn in front of the Columbia cameras in Pop Goes the Easel.
Pop Goes the Easel was the only Stooge comedy I was in. I had also been in about a half a dozen, or maybe close to a dozen, major films, just bit parts. But it sort of made me feel like a pro.
Hey, come back here!
And here was Phyllis, who was about 2 or 3 years younger, and I was asked by the director to kind of lead her through this hopscotch sequence because she didn't know what she was doing. I probably didn't either, but I was trying my very best to, I felt important. I enjoyed it. I wanted to make my dad proud. Everything that I did in my life, when I went to school, I wasn't trying to get A's for me. I was trying to do it for him. He was so giving and loving, I couldn't say no to him.
The other little girl sharing that hopscotch board with Joni also has a Stooge pedigree. She's Larry's daughter, Phyllis.
My mother, Phyllis, never had any issues with being a child of celebrity. She went to school, her mom took care of the house, her dad went out to work. So it was just a very conventional lifestyle, if you will. Her father just happened to be Larry of the Three Stooges.
Larry, the second of the Stooge characters. Larry, the perpetual but ineffectual peacemaker. Larry, the poor sap who always seemed to be standing in the wrong spot when Mo went on the warpath.
Always button in, eh? Come on, get out of my way.
I'm a victim of circumstance.
Larry, is kind of in the middle. He's just grateful that he doesn't get the worst of it.
Larry was this good catalyst. You know, I always called him like the Keith Richard of the Stooges, you know what I mean? Mo was like the Mick Jagger.
Not only were they professional colleagues all of that time, they were friends. Mo's family and my family, we socialized fairly regularly. They were very comfortable with their professional relationship. They had defined that relationship way back. Both were very happy with it. They liked each other, a lot of respect, and they were good friends. It's that simple.
Thinking about daughter Phyllis reminds me that Larry was not a typical father. He raised his kids while living in hotels, exchanging home cooking for room service. And he wasn't really a typical husband either. He seemed to have genuinely adored Mabel, his former vaudeville partner and wife for many years.
A dedicated husband. He really took care of Mabel, took care of the kids, you know, and he was just marvelous.
Larry pretty much cocooned my grandmother from the world. He doted on her. So Mabel's life was home-centric, and Larry was always there, pretty much to take care of all the day in and day out stuff.
I keep thinking of Larry at Christmas time. He would go out and he would shop, and he would come home with acres of presents. And his wife, or my wife at the time, or I'd say, "What have you got, Larry?" He said, "Oh, you knew it was a sweater. Well, here, I'll have to go get something else." He did that for weeks. He loved it.
Not a typical father, though a devoted one. And not a typical spouse, though a loving one. And in the final analysis, perhaps not even a typical stooge.
Will you join me?
Well, Larry loved a good time and loved a good joke, and would always want to tell you the latest joke that he heard. He was that kind of guy, jovial, fun-loving, and never took anything too serious, as opposed to Mo, who took things, you know, much more serious.
He was always an outgoing person as he grew up. He had a need to be funny. This was within, it was born in him.
Hey, you're in a court, not in the woods, Tarzan. Cut it out.
I did always get the sense that he was sort of a guy that liked his leisure time better than he liked work.
He was a fight fan. Went to the fights. He never picked the right guy. I can't remember ever him backing a winner.
But how can we be certain you won't give us a double cross? I'll put up my bankroll. If I miss, I'll take the loss.
He loved going to the track. And yes, he bet on the horses. He was a $2 bettor. He didn't squander his money, but he enjoyed it too.
As soon as it was called cut for the day, he'd be down to Santa Anita or, you know, whatever, but he wanted to just enjoy life.
And it was that quality of likability, along with the fact that he seemed so resolutely ordinary, that was the secret of Larry's success.
Wait a minute! I'll fix it!
Larry's just, he's like that kid that just wants everybody to be happy. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Just tell me what you want me to do. Now you told me what you want me to do. I did it, and now you're still mad.
Larry is the guy who'll go along with things. He's the good-natured sap who just gets caught up in whatever is going on, whether they're trying to be plumbers or caterers or whatever it may be.
Greeting cards, folks.
Larry is often called the stooge in the middle. And that's what he was, a regular guy eternally caught in the never-ending conflict between the domineering Mo and the indomitable Curly.
Mistaken identity.
As such, he became the audience's surrogate, the relatively same one viewers could most readily relate to as the stooge most like them. Never as hilariously hot-headed as Mo, nor as outrageously oblivious as Curly, Larry was, perhaps in his own sly way, the most lovable of the Stooges. And that extended to his off-camera persona as well.
First of all, he was my father-in-law for 20 years. Not many nicer people would you ever know than Larry Fine.
He knew everybody in town. Everybody knew him. I never met anyone who didn't like him that ever met him. Larry Fine was one of the nicest men I ever knew.
Happy-go-lucky, gregarious, and generous to a fault, he was someone who had an enormous talent to make people like him. That talent was always apparent on camera, too, along with another equally important one. Larry always demonstrated an ability as a comic actor that, like Moe's, remains undervalued by many.
Darling, I have come for you.
For while he might not have been a Brando or a Barrymore, he possessed a gift that is just as rare as theirs.
You're breaking my heart.
Our favorite Stooge is Larry, and it's because he's the great reactor. You know, he's the one who makes everything else funnier. If you watch what's going on and watch his reaction to it, it's a scene unto himself.
If you watch Larry, which a lot of people don't because action's going on with Curly or Moe, you'll see Larry performing in the background and doing his reactions with his hands, with his face.
Get going.
He ran out of us.
You dummy, he slid out the window.
Hey!
I love periphery.
How you guys coming in there?
You know, looking at the edges, just looking at what Larry was doing, you know, in the back, while Curly was being slapped by Moe, he'd be like, you know, wincing and doing antics and stuff like that. And I thought it was funnier than the lines he had.
If you just watch Larry, that's a comedy show in itself. It's his facial expressions, it's his gestures, which is really genius. Larry contributes his own reactions, which make it all work for the three of them in their own dynamic way.
And so Larry, the perfect foil, provided the put-upon Curly with a protector and the pugnacious Moe with a punching bag. And he gave them something else as well. He furnished them with a profile that separated them from their comedic counterparts.
He was somewhat of the middleman and the reactor among the group, which kind of holds them all together as they play off of Larry. There aren't any other great comedy trios. We've seen over the years great comedy duos, Abbott and Costello for one, Martin and Lewis. But it's very difficult for three comedians to be able to do the choreography that's necessary.
I'm also really happy that Larry wound up as a stooge, because the funny and friendly Mr. Fine was a pleasure to know.
Sometimes I think you got part of a brain. Thanks. Don't mention it. Yeah.
Are you dancing? Are you asking? Yes, I'm asking. And I'm dancing.
Now, Larry had always aspired to become a serious musician, but way back in the beginning of his stint as a stooge, Ted Healy had banished his beloved violin from the act. It was the day the music died, or so it seemed.
Pitch that an octave higher. Ole, 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 oh, ole, ole, ole-o.
Oh, King Cole, you're a merry old soul, without a care and fancy-free. Please call for your pipe, please call for your bowl, and here are your fiddlers three, that's we. Ah, ha, ha, ha.
But music was here long before Ted Healy arrived, and for the Stooges, it was going to be there long after he departed, and music wound up being a central element of the Columbia two-reelers. And that made perfect sense, because the Stooges came out of vaudeville, where music was an important part of the show.
Maestro.
And they starred in talking pictures, where music was a drawing card that had been unavailable in silent films. So the boys tuned up, cracked their knuckles, cleared their throats, and musically went on their merry way.
The cows were flying about as the wife made sauerkraut. So we...
That settles it! I quit!
A number of shorts like 1942's Loco Boy Makes Good and 1939's Yes, We Have No Bonanza cast Moe, Larry, and Curly as singing waiters. And this particular occupation gave them the opportunity to sing for their suppers, if, that is, they could keep the suppers from winding up on somebody's head. And whether it was grand opera, or something a little more folksy.
On the range, where the roasts and the pies we do bake.
Moe, Larry, and Curly always managed to mix sweet music with their signature mayhem.
I'll take custard for mine. Oh, custard!
Certainly!
And now everything is all jazz.
even mounting a full-blown production number worthy of a first-class film musical.
They sung the great song, Swinging the Alphabet, that was brought to the Stooges by writer Charlie Chase. That song was actually performed by his maid for Charlie's children, and it turned out to be a classic musical number for the Three Stooges.
I'm going to sit down. I'm going to test your mental sit down. I'm going to test your mental coordination with a little sit down with a little number called Swinging the Alphabet.
Swing it, brother, swing it, swing it. Right, swing it.
Right up,
right.
I'll explain it so even you can understand. My colleagues will assist. Ready, sister? Get that junk out of here. Come on, boys, scram. I'll give you the idea in a nutshell. B-A, bay. B-E-B. B-I, bicky bye. B-O, bo. I'll give you the correct demonstration. Cutie pie, pound those horse teeth.
B-A, bay. B-E-B. B-I, bicky bye. B-O, bo. Bicky bye, bo. B-U, boo. Bicky bye, bo, boo. C-A-say, C-E-C, C-I, sicky-si, C-O, so, sicky-si, so, C-U, sue, sicky-si, so, sue.
Get the idea, girls? Now we'll all join together on the letter D.
D-A-day, D-E-D, D-I, dicky-di, D-O-do, dicky-di-do, D-U-do, dicky-di-do-do, la-da-da-da, F-J-A, H-E-E, H-I, hickey-hi, H-O-ho, hickey-hi-ho, H-U-hoo, hickey-hi-ho-ho. J-A-J, J-E-G, J-I, jicky-ji, J-O-jo, jicky-ji-jo, J-U-do, jicky-ji-jo-jo.
K-A-K, K-E-K, K-I, kicky-kai, K-O-ko, kicky-kai-ko, K-U-ku, kicky-kai-ko-ku. L-A-lay, L-E-lee, L-I, licky-lie, L-O-lo, licky-lie-lo, L-U-loo.
Curly's a do, M-A-may, M-E-me, M-I, Mickey, my, M-O-mo, Mickey, my, mo, M-U-moo, Mickey, my, mo, moo.
Now, it's true that it was Larry who had the formal training, and his musical contributions to the shorts are wonderful. But surprisingly, or perhaps not so surprisingly, given his gift for producing nutty noises, it was Curly who manufactured many of the Stooges' most memorable musical moments.
Mister, can you crop on all? No, but I can sing.
Men, man the pumps.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. A pumping we will go. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. A pumping we will go.
Let's go and get the dough.
Let's go and get the moolah. 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 Go and get the moolah.
And considering his facility with physical comedy, it's hardly shocking that when it came to dancing, Curly could really cut a hunk of rug.
The delegates are here for the round table conference.
How many of them are there?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe 5, 6, 7, or 8, maybe.
5, 6, 7, 8.
I was amazed at how a man that heavy set could be that graceful. I was watching his feet. It was almost like a ballet dancer.
You know, you're not a bad dancer yourself. Are you insinuating? Gets dancing.
And this talent would serve him well off camera, too, although in a slightly more dignified form. Yes, in 1937, Curly danced on the night he was wed for a second time.
Oh, boy, I can see it now. Me coming home from a hard day's work, I whistle for the dog, and my wife comes out. Me, with my own wife and children. Dozens of them.
Dozens of them?
Yeah.
How many's that?
2.
This time, the bride was a girl named Elaine Ackerman, and this time, unlike his doomed trip down the aisle almost a decade before, he had his mother's blessing.
What I remember my mom telling me is that she was working at Bullock's in the fur department, and Curly came into the department to buy a fur coat, I believe, from one of his babes. And he just totally told my mother she was absolutely gorgeous, and he wanted to date her. I don't remember how long they dated, but it wasn't a long, long courtship, I don't believe.
Jenny's once thriving real estate business had gone bust with the Depression, and she wasn't in the best of health. But that didn't stop her and Saul, along with Curly's devoted brothers, from celebrating the marriage of their favorite baby boy. There's an old family story about how Jenny, at the beginning of the Columbia years, had attended a showing of one of the two reel films at a Brooklyn theater and immediately began screaming at the screen, loudly berating Moe for being so mean to his poor little brother. But the fact is that the money from Hollywood had assured a comfortable retirement for her and her husband, even in the depths of economic calamity. So maybe this show business thing wasn't so bad after all, because it had, among other things, made it possible for them all to be together on this California afternoon, an afternoon full of peace and promise. Curly was happy that day, and he made millions happy every day. But who was this charismatic clown, really? Who was this manic man-child who created so unforgettably the third part of the Stooge trio, and who, for all his open-faced innocent charm, sometimes seemed to conceal more than he revealed? Well, as it turns out, my Uncle Curly was a lot more than just your garden variety knucklehead.
Certainly.
A lot more than just a collection of squeaks, squeals, and gyrations. Next time, we'll dig deep into the complicated psyche of America's foremost comedy, Psycho, as he discovers that life at the top can be anything but rosy, and that success often comes with a healthy dose of heartache.